Everything is fine right now. The economy is fine. It is stronger than ever. How could anyone dare to say that the empire of the United States of America could be in trouble? That is heresy, and everything that we look at shows that the economy is doing great. We have low unemployment, we have a strong housing market, we have more job openings than ever before, and things are amazing. How do I know that? Because so many smart people in the comments tell me that. That's how I know. Duh. Yes, I was being sarcastic in case you couldn't tell. In fact, the economy is so fine that many Americans are falling behind on their bills. Yet another sign that everything is doing fantastic, right? And I wish I wasn't coming across these stories, guys, but it is happening and I can't ignore it. And I hope many of you don't either, because that's how people end up getting themselves in trouble. When you have people in there saying everything is fine and that there's absolutely nothing to worry about. That's exactly what happened right before the last great financial crisis. So many people were totally oblivious to what was happening and said the same thing. Everything is fine. There's nothing to worry about. I'm just going to jump in and buy a house because, you know, homes just keep going up in value. The stock market's at all-time highs. You know, if I don't get in now, I'll never get in. And people are following that same line of thought today. However, the share of different types of debts that became 90 days delinquent in the first quarter of 2023 is up 1.08%, and last year it was 0.71%. So the amount of 90-day delinquencies on everything, we're talking mortgages, credit cards, car loans, pretty much the things that most people have, the delinquencies on all these things are on the rise over the past year. When you're looking at just credit cards, about 4.5% of consumers' credit cards went into a 90-day delinquent period last quarter. When you compare that to a year ago, the number was barely 3%. You're talking almost a 2% increase in credit card delinquencies in just 1 year. Auto loan delinquencies are up to 2.33% from 1.61% a year ago, and mortgage delinquencies, which is the lowest one on the list, is at 0.59% compared to 0.34% a year ago. And here's the thing. The age group that has the largest amount of delinquencies out of everybody are 18 to 29-year-olds. The crazy thing is, a lot of 18 to 29-year-olds are the same people that have student loan debt as well that's still not being paid on in many cases because of the moratorium on the student loan payments, which is set to expire at the end of June. Actually, the older I get, the more I enjoy these really cloudy days like this when it's overcast, because that just means it's not as hot, and I'll take it. And here's the other thing that people need to understand and look at, guys. For everyone that says everything is fine and points to the low unemployment rate, we've already covered time and time again that every time unemployment gets this low, this is what happens right before a big recession. So we have that to look forward to. But not only that, how come there's so many delinquencies going up at a time when unemployment is so low? That's kind of like a head scratcher, isn't it? Because if everyone has jobs and it's easy to get a job if you get fired from one or laid off, then it should be not that hard to pay for all your bills, right? Well, that's not what we're seeing. And this is why I think that things are just going to get a whole lot worse before they get better. There's so many things that we're waiting for the boot to drop on when it comes to when the Fed's actually going to pivot. That's going to signal a big recession. When the student loan payments are actually going to resume. People are going to be paying extra money on that. When are people going to start losing more jobs and the unemployment rate starts going up? These are all things that are almost guaranteed to happen within the next year. Obviously, we can't guarantee anything, but the odds are looking way more in favor of these things happening versus them not happening. So I think, to me, the question for a lot of people becomes, at what point can you not pay your bills? We also know that the consumer debt hit over $17 trillion, okay, according to the New York Fed, and credit card balances now are almost $1 trillion as well. And our government is setting a horrible example right now. Especially young people are watching the government build up this enormous amount of debt and looking like they almost are going to default on the debt. And that's the example that our leaders of the country are setting for our American youth, that, oh, don't worry, just borrow to the hilt and figure out a way not to pay for it. That's kind of the example that our government sets for everybody right now, which is just terrible. But here's the thing that people don't realize is the government can print more money and you cannot. And following their lead as an example of how to run your finances is a guaranteed recipe for disaster right now. Now, if we look at the Great Recession as a guide on when people actually won't be able to afford to pay their bills anymore, according to Wallet Hub, that number is getting closer and closer, because right now the average household has about $10,000 in credit card debt. And if it goes up by about another $2,000, that's the limit that it hit back during the great financial crisis, which was the breaking point when people started really defaulting on everything and just couldn't pay for things anymore. So we're getting very close to that. And that's why I keep telling people, like, look, you can look at the rosy side of things right now. You can call me a gloom and doomer. But the reality is these things are happening, and whether or not you want to pay attention to it, that's on you. In fact, 1/3 of the people who do have credit card debt have more credit card debt right now than they do in savings. That just shows you how upside down the average person is right now on their finances. Why are you at the beach, Michael? Well, had to jump ship and actually abandon ship on the video in the neighborhood because it started pouring rain. All those clouds I was admiring earlier were bearing gifts of lots of water. So now sun's shining again, out here on the beach, and you guys can see all the seaweed behind me. It smells pretty bad, actually. It's not nearly as much seaweed as we had in the past, but I figured it'd still be nice to come out here and finish the video at the beach. And it's funny because this whole situation that we were talking about earlier, when it comes to all these people that think everything is fine, well, I thought the weather was gonna be fine, and just saw a few clouds, you know, minor recession out there floating, and then wham, big rain shower. I think that's the same thing that's gonna happen in the economy. So, interesting analogy for today's video that happened in real time. Now, a lot of people are always asking if I know what percentage of single-family homes were purchased by real estate investors or institutional investors, and I never had much info on that until I came across this article today. And it turns out that 38% multifamily units as of 2021 are owned by individual investors, and 42% are owned by corporate entities, and only 3% are owned by REITs, which are the real estate investment trusts. But the real growth when it comes to institutional investment has actually been in the single family home sector, which we knew these guys were buying up a lot of property, but how much? Well, it turns out that investors bought 24% of all single family homes that were sold in 2021, but at the same time, investors only own 5% of all single family homes throughout the entire country. So that might not sound like a lot, but the thing is, at that rate, at how fast they have been accumulating single family homes, investors could end up owning 40% of all single family homes in the United States by just 2030. So it's 2023, guys. Talking 7 more years, they could own 40% of all single-family homes if nothing is done to stop this. They like to argue and say, well, we only own 3.6% of all the housing throughout the entire country, so it's not investors that are causing these housing problems and shortages and prices to go insane. But we know very well, not all areas are equally affected by this. You have these institutional investors concentrate on one given area where they have determined that the demographics, as far as the neighborhood, the income, and what they can get on returns for rents meet their criteria, and they kind of overinvest in those areas. In fact, up in the Twin Cities area near Minneapolis, it was determined that institutional investors own about 20% of the single family homes. There's even one neighborhood near one of the universities where 43% of all single family homes are owned by investors. So that is insane. And for everybody who loves our freedom here in America, you gotta love that corporations can buy more houses than people. And guys, make sure you just take a quick 2 seconds to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't done that already. It helps the channel tremendously if you're enjoying my content. But it's not like everything is going so well for all the investors, okay? In fact, in March of 2023, investors actually lost money on 13.5% of all of the deals that they sold. This is not just happening in the residential housing market, but we know commercial real estate is also in big trouble. There's a lot of loans that are set to renew, and lots of defaults are coming with that. You have office buildings in major metros like Los Angeles and Manhattan that are literally turning into zombie towers as we speak. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's right-hand man, is talking about how real estate's not such a great investment anymore. Even financial advisors are looking for alternative investments for their clients right now. And our friends at Masterworks are here to give you one of the most exclusive investments available: contemporary art. Masterworks allows almost any investor to invest in fractional shares of art from legends like Picasso, Banksy, and Monet, meaning you only pay a fraction of the total value of these valuable paintings, which in today's volatile economy explains why over 700,000 people have signed up for this. Demand is continuing to grow by the day, but my subscribers can skip the wait list by signing up with the link down in the description below. Now, you want another sign that everything is fine for everybody out there who thinks that? Well, the Fed just came out on Monday and said that there could be more interest rate hikes on the horizon. And we already know that Wall Street is betting on the fact that there's going to be no more interest rate hikes, that they're going to pause. We had multiple central bankers step forward this week and say that the jury is still out on whether they're going to raise interest rates in June again or keep them flat. But one thing seems to be totally clear, is that a reversal or a pivot in June is pretty much 100% not going to happen. Because the job market data is still hanging in there strong, there's been practically no progress on inflation over the past couple of months, and now we have this debt ceiling crisis and how much that might affect things. Their overall goal still is to return inflation to 2%. Now, obviously, some of these things like the banking crisis might make inflation go down a little bit faster without the Fed increasing rates any further. But Fed President Tom Barkin, he said he's not yet convinced their job is done, and they may need to make more of an impact in order to bring inflation down to where it needs to be. He's even saying that the labor market is still completely hot right now, and there's probably more work that needs to be done. And he pretty much said in his interview on Monday that he's open to either keeping interest rates the same or another potential rate hike. But Raphael Bostic of the Atlanta Fed said that he's more in favor of keeping interest rates paused right now and not raising them any higher, because the Fed has a long history of over-tightening in situations like this and then driving the economy into a deep recession. And I've heard both sides of the arguments on this, and I think a lot of people, maybe not everyone, but it seems like most of the people who watch my channel actually want a deep recession, because there will be health benefits from this, okay? It's not like having a deep recession is all bad news. There's going to be a lot of good things that will come from it, but obviously hoping and wishing for that means that some people are going to fall on extremely hard times, lose their homes, lose their jobs, go through divorces, and probably even death in some cases. A major recession can cause a lot of major problems with people's households and their family dynamics and their finances. But the reality is, guys, it mainly hits people that have been saying everything has been fine. People who don't think this is going to happen or who are not prepared for it to happen are the ones who are going to get blindsided and hit the hardest when things really start crumbling down. And it's really hard to feel sympathy for that. I mean, no matter what, it's good to have compassion for our fellow humans, of course, but there's that old saying, you can only lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. And this is kind of that same situation right now where you can look at all the things right in your face of what's happening, and if you still choose to think everything is fine, well, then you probably are going to get burned. And if you need another point to solidify that, well, Home Depot just reported this week that Americans are cutting back on home remodeling after a big uptick in home remodeling during the pandemic. And it's no wonder that this is due to economy that's getting worse, inflation, and everything starting to cost too much. They didn't hit their revenue targets, and it ended up causing their stock to go down and other retail stocks to go down. And their projected revenue for the quarter was supposed to be $38.45 billion. They only hit $37.26 billion. So it's not like they were hugely off, but still, $1 billion is $1 billion, guys. I think we can all agree that's a lot of money. They're saying that sales for all their stores is down on average about 4.6% right now, and they're expecting their profits to decline even further throughout the year. Now they're expecting sales to decline another 2 to 5% throughout the rest of the year. And a year ago, they were predicting that sales would be flat, that it wasn't going to go up, it wasn't going to go down, but instead, it's going down. So that becomes the problem with the people that say everything is fine, because they're ignoring all these real-time stats that just keep popping up on a weekly basis. I mean, it's kind of unbelievable, all the things that we're talking about here week after week in the videos, and I don't even really have to repeat myself, guys. I mean, obviously we talk a lot about the housing market, but these other economic things that are happening with more bank failures and businesses not hitting their projected profits at a time when the economy is great and unemployment is low, right? Just like we talked about earlier, how are people defaulting on their debt at a time when unemployment is practically at record lows? It doesn't make sense. Well, it does make sense because things are not nearly as good as they would like you to believe right now. The last thing I want you to hear from me is that I am actually an optimistic person, believe it or not, which some people might have a hard time believing after all the things I talk about here on the channel. But I kind of take my own advice, guys. Like, I read these things, I research all these things, so I know what's happening and I know what to do to prepare myself in case things do get bad. But I never lose hope that it will get better, because eventually I think it will. When? I don't know. How long? I don't know. But eventually it will get better. And let's face it, we just went through a lot of boom years. Even before the pandemic, you know, things were going along pretty good before that came along. And then a lot of people would argue that after the initial scare and they printed all the money and all the stimulus was given out, that life was great for a lot of people, especially who got a lot of that stimulus money. People got to buy houses at record low interest rates and still at pretty good deals if you bought, you know, before the middle of 2021 probably. But we can't go through this massive uptick in prosperity and wealth and success without having it come back down to reality first. And that's just how I think. That's where I think things are at right now, and I'm ready. I'm ready for it to come down. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I post a new video. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.